What's up, everybody? It's Geoff Grammer here with the Albuquerque Journal, joined with by Sean Reider. And one of these days, I'm going to remember to click off that welcome screen when our countdown actually is over. But until then, you guys get to see a countdown and then the welcome screen for a little bit longer while I'm trying to figure out all these buttons. Anyway, Sean, how you doing?
Doing good, Geoff. Thanks for having me on, as always, to Albuquerque Journal Sports Live.
For those that don't know, we do one of these shows every Monday at 2 p.m. For the most part, it sounds like we'll probably continue some even through basketball season when football is over with some weekly show. Monday afternoons, probably most weeks work. We're still figuring some of that out, but there will be some basketball content on here throughout the season. And won't have post-game shows for basketball, but we do post-game after every football game. Usually about 45 minutes, sometimes an hour or so after the game, while Sean does his post-game work. He does have a story to write and some interviews to do and things like that. This past week, he did so after a Lobo football win over Air Force. That is back-to-back wins for the Lobos. And we are now at a point of the season where things go really right for the Lobos. They're in a pretty good spot. They still have something to play for, which midway through the season hasn't always been the case in recent years. We'll talk about that a little bit. This week's opponent is Utah State in Logan, Utah. Sean, we start usually Mondays off with kind of a recap of what happened earlier today at Bronco Mendenhall's weekly press conference. What went on at the press conference that's notable for the show?
I will preface this by noting that whether they're coming off a win or they're coming off a loss, all the press conferences on Monday are pretty much exactly the same in terms of demeanor and how things are discussed from Bronco Mendenhall. There are not a lot of swings back and forth, in the way that you might see from other coaches and sometimes players when they're put in that spot. Very, very consistent, and today was very similar. The kind of tone that he brought to the table, very similar to, like I just said, to the post New Mexico State presser heading into the bye there, where they're happy with a win and happy to see players rewarded for their hard work and all that, but also still a lot of work to be done, and they're certainly cognizant of that. And that's pretty much it was kind of the general tone today. In terms of Utah State, Bronco also does not talk a ton. He talks probably the least of any coach I've ever covered in any sport about upcoming opponents. It's just not something he really addresses a ton, honestly. Sometimes you get an opening statement where a coach will talk for 5-10 minutes about the upcoming team, and he is just not that guy. In terms of Utah State, he did note that they're really explosive offensively. They do have some playmakers, particularly running back Rasul Faizan, wide receiver Jalen Royals as well. To my mind, one of the best receivers in the Mountain West. And they put up a bunch of yards, and they have played kind of a brutal schedule to start. They have one win over Robert Morris. That was a season opener. And they have a really ugly kind of mucky loss to Temple. But with a 1-5 record, 4 of those losses are to Boise State, who's ranked right now, USC, who has been ranked, Utah, who has also been ranked, and UNLV, who's also been ranked as well. Some really good teams there. So, yeah.
So what do we make then? What do we make of it? I saw the line range from anywhere from like 1.5, one way or the other to pick 'em. This is obviously a fairly close game for being on the road, and the Lobos to even be in a pick 'em realm, if that's where it is. I'll pull up what the current ranking is. The current betting line is on Vegas Insider, is where I'm pulling it up right now to see what the consensus is. But the fact that the Lobos are even in kind of pick 'em conversation on the road game is telling this is a better team. It's an improved team.
Yeah. What did you think when you first saw the pick 'em from Circa? That's where I first saw it first. Did that surprise you at all?
A little bit. I'm seeing it now, just so we're clear, as Lobos by 2.5 at MGM, 2 at a few other places as low as 1.5. So I'm seeing as Lobos favored by 1.5 to 2.5 realm.
The pick'em element surprised me, and we've talked a little bit on the show before about those kind of 11 a.m. Sunday Circa lines that come out early and all that too. This is not like a dog on Circa or anything like that. Yeah, about 1.5 to 3 was kind of what I was expecting. when you were kind of, you left the press box on Saturday night and you're thinking about, okay, well, what's it going to look like, coming in next Saturday? This is kind of the range I was expecting.
I'll tell you what I think happened here is anybody who watched the UNLV game, the UNLV Utah State game on Friday, knows that in the end, UNLV kind of let their foot off the gas a little bit, and Utah State did come back. It's what I've seen with Lobo football and New Mexico State football for the better part of a decade, not the last 2 years for the Aggies. Anybody who's watching that's an Aggie fan. But basically, when a team like UNLV is up 41-7 at halftime, the other team's probably going to put up some touchdowns and have something good to build on and all that good stuff. And maybe that's what you build on as the team. But another thing it does is it makes the computers, the things that pump out these lines that didn't watch the game, they just see the final point total and they're like, okay, Utah State lost, but by less than we thought they would. And I think the computer element tends to, and that's what Circa is. The first initial lines at most books, including Circa on Sundays, is just what the computers tell you. Computers and just looking at the final score tell you that Utah State played a little better than the point spread would have suggested. So they look better than that. I think once any kind of human element or anything like that kind of jumped into the equation, then you start inching it towards New Mexico's side a little bit because the Lobos, frankly, have just looked better. Even if they're going on the road, they have looked better than Utah State. That doesn't mean they're going to go win this game easily by any stretch. They're not. This should be a close game, but I think that's one thing that sometimes those initial lines don't take into account is that a final point spread, a final scoring outcome made it look like they played better against UNLV than they did. The reality is that was a 41-7 halftime score, that UNLV was not playing regular, normal themselves kind of football in the second half. And Utah State, to their credit, played pretty well, but not against a frontline kind of UNLV squad.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's to kind of build on that point too, that, in rewatching it, not all of it, but as much as I could yesterday, last night in particular, I mean, that UNLV game, I mean, it was a disaster on all three fronts for Utah State in that first half. I mean, it was awful. And you go back and you read, a couple of the stories and all that, and you're kind of looking at availability and everything there too. I mean, Nate Dreiling, the head coach there, the interim head coach, former New Mexico State defensive coordinator, did a heck of a job with the Aggies defense over the last couple of years. He kind of said that he went into the locker room and he was just like, look, like you guys just have to execute, basically. Like that's more or less what he said. Like we're calling all the same things. We're gonna go out there. You just have to get it done at this point. And then the second half, I mean, UNLV kind of put their, like you mentioned, took their foot off the gas a little bit. But they also, Utah State did a lot of really good things offensively. I mean, they moved really, really well. Defensively, they came up with some, they got some good things done there too. And that's a defense that has been just all over the place all year so far. This is a weird team in the sense that, like, Bronco, talked about it today, their record, he thinks, is far more indicative of who they have played than what they actually are as a team. And I think there's merit to that. I also think, that Robert Morris win wasn't exactly a super comfortable 45-7 win or anything like that either. That was a bit of a struggle there too. The Temple loss, that was, I don't know if you can totally ignore that as well. And just, how you're playing, some of these upper tier teams too. I mean, I think you got to look at that too. I think it's probably somewhere more in the middle. I think it is. I don't think it's entirely just that they've had a really tough schedule, because they've had some defensive lapses that just are kind of mind-boggling, and they have been good offensively, but they just have not been supremely consistent enough to be in a point where they can really threaten a couple of these teams. So I don't know. It's this Air Force. It felt like you could look at the overall average numbers and they could give you a pretty decent picture of what the team was kind of at that point. Utah State, not quite.
So you're happy, or not happy, but you're okay with this line being what it is.
I think it makes sense. Yeah, I do. And that was more what I kind of thought of initially. That being said, I could look more at Utah State throughout the week and probably have different thoughts too. But I agree with this overall process.
You have, and we've touched on this all year. Like we even when the Lobos were 0-4, you could see improvement. Couple things that I think speak to the improvement, like quantifying it, right? It's not just people saying they're a better team. Trust me, they're a better team. Now they've won 2 in a row. A couple other things that I think you can see kind of quantify that there are actual gains being made are things like point spreads. They are now a favorite on the road in the Mountain West. I mean, geez, it's been a while, right? They're favorites in Mountain West games back-to-back weeks. They were a favorite over Air Force and covered it. They were a favorite against New Mexico State. When's the last time New Mexico's been favored in 3 straight FBS games? That's obviously probably not happened in a long time. But
When's
there's another thing.
New Mexico has played 3 straight
Yes,
teams with 1 win only that have struggled mightily in some regards, at least on one side of the ball.
New Mexico has struggled, or New Mexico has played in 3 consecutive weeks what New Mexico was for 3, 4, 5 consecutive years.
Yeah,
they played that kind of team, and they aren't that team right now. So they've been favored in 3 straight weeks against FBS teams. They are favored this week on the road at a Mountain West team. It's things that don't happen often. But another thing that I saw today from Broncos press conference, you tweeted it out. You had asked him something to the effect of closing games and something like that. Something to the effect of closing games. I don't know that you asked him or somebody else asked him, but point being, he said he doesn't know the last time or can't remember the last time he had 6 onside kicks in back-to-back games, right? In 2 games.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that for a minute. The UNM Lobos have had opponents kick an onside kick to them, trying to come back 6 times in the last 2 games. I'll bet you that is a record. I'll bet you that hasn't happened to the UNM Lobos in back-to-back games, maybe ever. I don't know. I mean, how often are the Lobos ahead in back-to-back weeks to the point where the opponents are onside kicking, trying to make that furious comeback late?
Yeah, I have, and it really, like, until he said it, I did not realize it had been 6 onside kicks. Because I asked him, one of the things that he mentioned on Saturday was that, very much as a team, they're learning how to, play ahead by 21 points or 24 points. And I asked him, have you seen that before? Like, of course, you've seen it before, in terms of rebuilding BYU and rebuilding Virginia, but how do you expedite that process? How do you address that with the team? And that was one of the things he mentioned. It is kind of you just have to be in games and doing it and facing all those onside kicks. And Air Force did. I mean, I don't. What was the number? Was it more than it was 3 or 4 onside kicks?
Yeah, I think it was 3 because I think New Mexico State. I thought I only remember
New Mexico State was only it was a lot of Air Force onside kicks. So, yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting wrinkle to all this, too. And that's kind of one of the main questions with this team. This is going to be a different week than this might be a different flow of the game than what we saw against New Mexico State and when New Mexico played New Mexico State and Air Force back-to-back weeks. Utah State's offense is pretty good. I mean, they can move the ball and they can get it done, but they're similar to New Mexico in the sense that the defense has just had these long struggles and had to play from behind too many times and all that too. And it'll be interesting to see if, there is a position where New Mexico is playing from ahead this week or maybe playing from behind. But I don't know. But some interesting things to just kind of think of heading into this game.
What else going into this game? We'll do the weekly question on the injuries. Obviously, he doesn't talk about them basically, but what do you know? What can you say about injuries or anything on that depth chart? I'll push that off just to get Jimmy H in here real quick. Jimmy H on YouTube is asking, hey, Sean, do you have a different attitude or demeanor when writing your stories after a game, be it a win or a loss, or is that all the same? And then he kind of follows that up with, I guess what I'm asking, is one harder than the other? We'll start it off with you, Sean. I mean, you are in second year of covering Lobo football. Do you find covering a win or a loss any harder or easier so far with Lobo football?
This is a really good
comment about Lobo basketball in a minute.
This is a really good question, and I think to kind of I think honestly it is different between sports in my opinion. Like when I covered basketball, like in college and all that too. Like honestly, I kind of, I don't want to say enjoyed covering losses, but like losses were like, I don't know, like when I was covering hoops, it was like, because you lose in basketball, it's not a death sentence or anything like that. Everybody loses in basketball. and you could always get something interesting and get interesting perspectives that you wouldn't after a win and all that too. I guess in the context of UNM and football, honestly, I mean, attitude and demeanor wise, I'm usually tired no matter what writing after any game. So that's just kind of what it is there.
And then you got to put up with me for an hour on a live show.
Yeah. Is one harder than the other? I wouldn't say a win is harder than a loss or a loss is harder than a win. Just some games, it really depends. Like the Montana State game in particular, that was a loss. That was not a hard game to write off of. There was some very interesting things going on there. That ended up being a notebook that I really liked writing. This Air Force win, this ended up being a notebook that I really liked writing, and I enjoyed the process there too. The Boise State game last year, that was just a tough game to write off of in some ways because you had some interesting things going on there too with Devin's first career start and all that, but it was still a 42-14 loss. So I wouldn't say a win or a loss or whatever makes it difficult. And sometimes it's what you get after the game too, in terms of coaches or players saying interesting things or being particularly receptive to questions and all that. But I that's a really good question. I guess just to kind of answer the other question, I wouldn't say one's harder than the other. And frankly, I mean, if you're good enough at your job, like in this particular role, one shouldn't be harder than the other. Geoff, on basketball though, what are your thoughts?
100 to me, 100% depends on the coach and sort of the demeanor in a post game of the coach, because the coach sets the tone for how everyone else is allowed to act. You could have a bunch of players and staffers and SIDs and everybody that don't take losses that personally or that hard every single night, that knowing there's going to be another game in a week or another game in a few days for basketball. They could have all that mindset. It only takes one person in college athletics to sort of set the entire tone and the entire mood, and that's the head coach. That's one thing I will say. I have noticed quite a bit is if the coach wants to be in a bad mood, everybody else has to be in a bad mood. Nobody else is allowed to be happy around a bad mood coach. So I think it's important for coaches to kind of remember that and set the tone a little bit. And that's why they get paid the big bucks, right? How that affects writing or doing your job in a post game. If everybody's just kind of angry and snippy and short with you about everything, it's a little more annoying. It doesn't really make writing the story hard or harder or easier. If anything, I'd say a loss might be a little easier in basketball because it usually tends to go quicker.
Mm-hmm.
You're not talking a whole lot. You don't have to spend as much time in interviews. If you're on the road, if you even get a player, you might not get a player. But if you do get a player, usually it's a couple comments and then they go hit the bus real quick. The coach is usually pretty short with his post-game comments. So you usually get to writing and get your job done a little quicker on a loss. But the whole tone and the whole mood that you kind of have to put up with, and it's not our spot to root for or against anything. But like if people are sit there in a bad mood around you, you're not going to sit there and be in a good mood and try and cheer them up. You're just doing your job.
Mm-hmm.
You can't help but be a little bit put into a certain tone when the coach and players that you're interviewing are all grumpy and mad about it. So I would say the tone after a loss is certainly set by the coach and can make things difficult mindset wise, but it actually goes a little quicker. And I would say after a win, things tend to take longer. Players tend to sign a few more autographs or go find their family in the stands before they talk with you. Wins can be a little bit harder logistically, just because the interviews seem to take a little bit longer and people laugh and joke a little longer. But the mood is much better. So there's my thoughts. Is I don't know if one's necessarily overall easier or harder. I can tell you losses are quicker though.
And I'll build on kind of like my coach comment from earlier too. Like I was a student and I covered Tom Izzo at Michigan State, and Izzo was, probably not surprisingly, he gave you better stuff consistently after a loss. And you had to match the tone and you had to use some tact in terms of approaching him with questions. But he would give you some really good stuff after a loss too. That was really interesting and kind of compelling to write about. Not always so after a win, but he could still give you good stuff anyways. But yeah, Jimmy, that's a really good question. It's something that I think about every now and then too.
I would say too that since you brought up Bronco and like Izzo and sort of how things are going now, Patino's probably better after a loss. Patino, he's never really setting a grumpy mood for that whole locker room. The players do a good enough job of that. They don't like losing, but Patino's usually probably a little better after a loss. I think Paul Weir was way better after a loss and would say a lot. He would actually, I think in his mind, it was therapeutic in some weird way to go over what just went wrong as quickly as he could. I think he did post games with Robert Portnoy in the same fashion, where he not only was okay with, but almost welcomed maybe the tough questions or the, hey, what went wrong question, right? He almost wanted to go through that really quick and make sure everybody knew he saw what was wrong too, and he acknowledged it, and he's got to fix it. He had an agent once tell him he's like, you really can't keep doing post game interviews with Geoff on the road. Like it's awful. I'd sit there and hold my phone up, and I'd film him, and Paul Weir would go into long explanations about things that were going wrong with the team and why they lost or why they did this. And his agent didn't even want him doing interviews with me anymore, which didn't happen. I mean, that's not exactly how that works. But I would say that Paul Weir was better or gave more content after losses than wins. And Patino's in a good, not a good mood, but he's always in a pretty level, steady mood. I'd say Craig Neal was certainly in a bad mood after losses, and I don't want to say deflect, but would sometimes be pretty nasty in post games after a loss. And that's those are the last three Lobo basketball coaches. So those are my thoughts on that. Throw another one in before we kind of talk about some specific players here. We got the real fake Elton Musk talking about the rest of the season. If the Lobos can go 4-2 the rest of the way, as Bronco Coach of the Year.
I think that really depends. I think he is. I think that really. I want to say he is probably the front runner, but I think that really depends on what happens the rest of the league. If Spencer Danielson, as a first-year head coach, does get Boise State into the playoff and does take them undefeated through Mountain West play and win a Mountain West championship, then I think Spencer Danielson's got an awfully good case too. And same for Barry Odom too.
Yeah, I'll say this: if the Lobos get to a bowl game and go 4-2, the Mountain West, who I have criticized for this before, one thing we've always done when we got kicked out in the basketball side of the postseason honors, and we decided to do our own media poll that I do every year for men's basketball. I oversee it. We put our vote totals for every award, for every all conference, for Coach of the Year, Player of the Year, and we put a vote total there, so people know, like, was it even close or not? One thing the Mountain West tends to do, they won't admit that they fix it this way, but it is a remarkable coincidence. Anytime there are two coaches, like in this case, maybe a bowl eligible UNM Bronco Mendenhall coach and a college football playoff team, be it UNLV or Boise State, if either one of them make the CFP and win the league, I'll bet you they find a way to do a co-coach of the year. The Mountain West will not, 99.9% of the time, will not name a coach of the year other than their champion coach. That is sort of one thing coaches tend to go with in general, but the league as a whole has a history of pretty much making sure their coach of the year is always their champion. In the rare instances that another coach is deserving of that, they usually still go with co-coach of the year as opposed to just, in this case, Bronco, if that were to happen. But I'll tell you what, man, if Bronco gets his team to 6 wins, he deserves at least co-coach of the year consideration. And it'll be interesting because this is a team that started 0-4. It is what it is, right? Like, and it took over a bad team, a bad program.
Barry Odom was the coach of the year last year, if I remember correctly, too. And we haven't been kicked out on the football side quite yet in terms of voting for coach of the year honors. I voted for Brent Brennan at San Jose State. They started 1-5, and they turned the corner. Some of you may remember, against New Mexico, and they were the best team in the league down the stretch, in my opinion. They were absolutely sensational. They didn't make it into the Mountain West Championship, and I know that's still a sore spot for San Jose State fans and all that. but they had a good case, and it came down to odd computer stuff. Brett Brennan, that was my vote, and I would think that honestly, what Bronco got them to a bowl, I think this would be more impressive than what Brett Brennan did last year too. So, because we got to think, what if they go, let's see, 4-2 down the stretch, so that would be okay, so that is 5-3 in the league, 5-3.
I mean, obviously, it depends on the Washington State game.
Excuse me, yeah, I forgot about that.
They do have one non-conference game left for those not familiar with their schedule.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know.
So look, I'll say this: if they go 4-2,
gets into a bowl, I think he's got a good case.
Yeah, if they get to a bowl, I think they got a good case. All right, we'll move on to one quick. Why does Bronco wear sweatpants on the sideline? Can't he wear slacks?
I've never
Fuller on YouTube. I have some thoughts on this too. You go first, Sean.
Yeah, a lot of coaches wear sweatpants. I know Kalen DeBoer has come under some real fire following the Vanderbilt loss for wearing a T-shirt and I believe sweatpants as well, and kind of Nikes and all that, to the point where I believe it was Tom Fornelli for CBS Sports when they were down 19-14.5 this last weekend against South Carolina. I think he said that Kalen DeBoer needs to come out at a halftime wearing a 3-piece suit. It has become a legitimate narrative in Tuscaloosa. I think Joe Goodman with AL.com wrote about it. I don't think we're really in that spot right now in Albuquerque. I'm a Timothy. I don't want to ever put words in the Broncos' mouth or say this is how he's thinking without knowing that for sure. I think it's just a comfort thing, and he's a guy that I know wore slacks before, but I think I would have to go back and check what he was wearing at Virginia. I mean, from what I know recently, he's always been kind of a hoodie and T-shirt and sweatpants guy, and yeah, if the team's losing, okay, then he's wearing sweatpants and the team is losing. If the team is winning, he's wearing sweatpants and the team is winning. So I don't know.
My thoughts are
who was the Jaguars head coach that wore I'm thinking of who was the Miami head coach that would wear the tie, the shirt and tie? Al Golden. And he would just get so sweaty in that just looked awful in that, on the sidelines wearing the white button up and the orange tie and all that. Miami's getting killed. Yeah, I don't know. There's something funny to that, but I would absolutely I can't imagine coaching wearing
Well, Rob's 2 cents from up in Colorado is I love the sweatpants and various new look Lobo t-shirts and hoodies. I will say Bronco seems to have been the guy to unveil a couple new looks on some t-shirts this year. I get it. I get why the head coach would be maybe first dibs on some gear, but between him and Patino at the first media practice recently for basketball a couple weeks ago had this old school logoed Lobo sweatshirt on that people were asking me about. And I guess what better way to advertise some new gear, if it is even for sale, than to have your head coaches wearing it. But yeah, it does seem that Bronco has unveiled a couple new designs this year for the first time. My thoughts on the coaches wearing this is this. During COVID, excuse me, for basketball, all the coaches went to the quarter zips, right, or polos or whatever. After COVID, some went back. Patino is a good case study because his dad is known for, these really high dollar suits, and Richard Patino is very much team quarter zip, as he has said, and he has not gone back. He has a lot of friends in the business who are more than happy to be team quarter zip, and he has jokingly, although I think he's serious about the topic, but he has lightheartedly pointed out that his dad, his old guard, is ruining it for everyone, because when the head coach wears a suit, the rest of the coaching staff has to wear a suit. And remember, not all these assistant coaches and video guys and managers all have suits that they want to wear 10 different suits throughout the course of a year. They don't like wearing suits. My take on it has always been this: I don't understand in the slightest why the head coaches ever wore suits or got dressed up. I'll keep it to my realm of basketball, right? You're in a crowded arena. This certainly applies, maybe even more so to football, where you're outside in 100-degree heat sometimes. But in the basketball arena, you have 15,000 people screaming, cussing, cheering, sweating, drinking beers, eating nachos and pretzels or whatever. You have 15 guys on each bench wearing shorts and tank tops. You have a bunch of guys running around up and down the court wearing striped shirts and have whistles. You have cheerleaders and people wearing mascots. And then there's one person in the entire arena you expect to wear a suit, and that's the head coach. It doesn't make sense. The guy interacting with all of them, the one guy interacting with most of them, to wear a suit. Never understood why that is. It isn't a look like, oh, he means business. To people say dress for the job you want or look respectful and all that good stuff. It makes no sense to me in the world of college coaching why you should have to wear a suit or slacks or any of that good stuff. I'm all for the coaches looking uniform per se, like actually having all wearing the same kind of shirt or something like that. But it doesn't make sense to me to expect a head coach to dress up. Now, I don't think Bill Belichick, who might go down as one of the best coaches of all time in all sports, I don't think a cutoff sweatshirt's necessarily the look you want out of your leader of a program either. And he would cut the sleeves off his sweatshirts and won a lot of games doing so. I don't know if that's the look you want. You don't want to look sloppy, but I don't understand why you need to dress up and wear a suit. There you go. Rant over.
I think I'll add I am team quarter zip. We can rag on my food tastes and talk about some other pretensions I may or may not have and all that. I am definitely team quarter zip. I will say Patino Sr. coming out in the all white suit last year. Was that against Seton Hall or something? That like, we need those moments every now and then. That was phenomenal. I mean, tremendous content.
I did say the coaches seem to kind of break in these new looks, as Rob is pointing out, and I have heard this before too. Just because the team or coaches are wearing them doesn't always mean they're available to the fans. So that is true. I've heard that gripe for a while. Sometimes the coaches and teams have access to shirts and apparel that fans do not, which is frustrating for fans when they see their coach wearing something that they really like. We are going to talk sports here too, guys. I promise you, but we got this one too. Tommy Cilantro pointing out, what about baseball coaches wearing actual uniforms? Don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't need to see, a guy that looks like me and has a big old belly and is in his 50s, 60s, or 70s, pulling up the, putting on cleats and stuff like that. A baseball coach to me can wear a polo or a quarter zip or whatever casual look he wants in the dugout. I don't need them to wear a uniform. I don't want to see them wearing a suit either, but I don't need to see them actually wearing a uniform. It cracks me up to think of, some of these older managers, especially who aren't in any kind of good shape or certainly aren't baseball players. They're baseball managers and they're maybe in their upper 70s and they're really old. And right before every game, they go into the locker room just like everyone else and they're putting on their uniform, just like an 8-year-old kid about to go play his little league game. So I don't understand.
I don't really. I mean, to me, it's become, and this is more the younger generation. I mean, I've seen younger generation of baseball managers, MLB in particular. I mean, wear the baseball pants, but a hoodie, or just sweatpants and a hoodie or a quarter zip or whatever. I don't really have any strong feelings about it. I mean, it's you're sitting in the dugout, you're managing the game. It's whatever. As long as it's not like that Chris Christie baseball pants look, I think you're all good.
Jimmy H wants to know, when I turn my hat around, does it mean there's breaking news in Lobo basketball? This is when it's business time. It's all business. It's like Over the Top. Sean, have you seen Over the Top? It's a movie.
Wrestling movie? Like, is that the arm wrestling movie?
It is.
I haven't seen it, but I know of it.
I think it's probably one of the best arm wrestling movies ever.
I will have to take your word for that, considering I can't think of one other arm wrestling movie. Aren't they like truckers too? Like,
oh yeah.
Okay, all right.
You got a custody battle going on. You got some truckers, and you got Over the Top. You got Sylvester Stallone, who I share a birthday with, by the way. Coincidentally.
Do you really? What's your birthday again?
Yeah, well, not the same birthday. I get different years, but July. We're July 5th. I'm a July 5th.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
So, all right, let's bounce back to some Lobo football. We are very critical. I am certainly of the Lobo defense. within context. This is a rebuilding program and all that. Somebody before the show had asked that we give some love to some individuals, at least. Maybe the stats overall don't reflect it, but individually, there have been some pretty good Lobo football players recently. I'm going to throw this up there. I'm going to let you kind of talk as much as you want to or not about anybody on the defensive side. Kind of didn't tell you I was going to do this, so I hope you are prepared for it, Sean. But Super West Sports is a social media account. I'm pulling these up from X. I believe there's also an Instagram account, and every week he basically takes the updated grades from Pro Football Focus. He aggregates, he takes somebody else's rankings and posts them every week, which isn't the coolest thing in the world to do in the world of journalism. But I am actually gonna just forget I said that and share with you.
It's what I mean, and frankly, to kind of build on that as you pull it up, I mean, it's what I do in some of the notebooks too. I mean,
yeah, and in reporting, I think it's fine.
Service, like, so yeah, no,
and he's giving full credit. He is giving full credit. We're giving full credit to both Super West Sports and Pro Football Focus. What this guy does is just takes kind of the Western FBS schools. I am going to start. There's 3 positions I'm going to pull up and show these rankings that he tweeted out earlier today. But I'm going to start on the safeties because one guy I've noticed I thought has been playing pretty well, and the grading does kind of bear it out here, is Christian Ellis, one of the best safeties, at least grade-wise, after the film is broken down. He's playing one of the best safeties out west. What do you think about Christian Ellis and maybe some other defensive players that have been standing out to you?
Having a really good season, particularly. I'm talking about Christian Ellis in particular. Having a very good season and a guy that they definitely needed on this defense. Ellis led the team in defensive snaps played last year. He played a ton. That was the most he had played heading into any season. I remember Troy Reffett, the former defensive coordinator at UNM. He's now at ULM with Brian Vincent. He told me before the season, like, we have got to find a way to get Christian Ellis as many reps, and we got to figure out a way to get him on the field as much as possible. And he was good last year. He ended up entering the transfer portal and withdrawing after that, and to kind of play under Bronco and all this too. And he's been good. I mean, and he has played a ton of snaps this year, and it's more of it's not because for him in particular, it's not because of the injuries. It's just because they have just needed him out there. And I thought he was really good against Air Force. I thought him, Noah Vinger, and Bobby Arnold, even though Bobby ended up leaving early in the second half, if I recall, that whenever that Bruin Fleischman play kind of happened, I thought they were really good in the secondary in particular. They all came up with some big plays in their own right. It was Christian and Bobby who were in on that third down play to kind of force that field goal early on after that really long Air Force drive. Definitely, I think it was Give Me $5 who mentioned this to us. I mean, there are guys in this defense that are doing a really nice job at the moment in not quite ideal circumstances given the health and all that. The defense definitely still has a ways to go. And, I was thinking about this last night too, even after I filed my notebook. I mean, I might write about this later in the week too. I mean, we're kind of at a point where we might just have to throw away a lot of the averages and all that from the first half of the season in terms of, defensive points allowed and, yards per game and everything kind of there, with the exception of a couple key metrics, because they're probably not going to tell us what this defense actually is on a week-to-week basis. Now, the defense has to certainly keep improving to a certain degree for that to be true. But this is definitely not a defense you can just look at the numbers and say, oh, well, this is what they are right now. Because they are right now, off the overall numbers, one of the worst defenses in the country. I think they have been at points this season. I don't think they are right now, but there still has to be improvement. Rob has a question. Bronco keeps mentioning being light on bodies for the defense. Can you remind us all of what their current scholarship situation is? I thought they were light there too. No. I'm pretty sure they're full up on scholarships at this point. So it's not.
I think light on bodies is more of the injury front, right?
Light on bodies is definitely the injury front, because they brought in a lot of defensive guys, particularly in that spring window, that spring portal window this last year. No, they're still light on bodies, and we didn't even get to it on on Saturday night because it was something that I noticed at the flow of the game and that did not bring up and did not ask Bronco about. That's my bad, guys. Jaden Wilson, linebacker, did not play did not play against Air Force. It literally was just Dimitri Johnson and Randolph Kapai. Those were the only two linebackers that played a snap against Air Force. They played all 77 defensive snaps. UNM as a whole only played 16 defensive players. That is the lowest number of the season. It wasn't even like they got 3 snaps for like David Murphy here and there or anything like that. They only played 16 people. And I think part of that is a little part of that is kind of predicated on what Air Force does and having the right guys in that situation to kind of keep the attack up and all that. We got a question on Saturday night too, were there second string guys kind of coming in late, and was that why they Air Force kind of got things going? That was not the case. In the moment, I remember saying that I thought the secondary was still ones late into the fourth quarter and all that, with the exception of kind of the injury things there with Bobby and Cam and all that. And then the linebackers, I was pretty sure too, for the most part as well. And the defensive line, I know they rotated. I mean, it really was just ones with like regular kind of, rotations in terms of like, we got to give guys a breather on the defensive line too. So they are really, really, I asked Bronco about it today and he didn't give us a ton on it, to be honest with you, but they're really banged up at linebacker right now. I wrote this in a story last week that, UNM is kind of in a spot where, they're hanging on by a thread where if Randolph Kapai or Dimitri does suffer an injury, then that's going to be a really tricky spot for them. Right now, Dimitri and Jaden Wilson are listed as an or at the for the co-starting spot at the Mike linebacker position. I did ask Bronco today if that was an injury for Jaden. All he said is that he'll be back. So I don't really know what that means, but yeah. So they desperately need linebackers. Playable linebackers to get healthy at this point. Jimmy H, I also asked about Bobby Arnold today. Bronco said he didn't know a timetable. I thought Bobby Arnold played terrific, really, really well against Air Force, and I thought he made a big difference in a lot of ways. And he just kind of added that flying around element to the defense that had been there, but maybe not super consistently throughout the season. He is also listed as an or at the nickel spot with Nigel Williams. Nigel Williams, I think, has done a good job in for the most part this season. And there is also another or between Gabe Lopez and Antonio Harris Jr. for the kind of will outside linebacker, really more of an edge rusher spot. Gabe did not play. Antonio Harris played. I think he ate just about every single one of Gabe's reps against Air Force. Thought Harris did a pretty good job for the most part. But yeah, so we'll see if Gabe and Jaden and Bobby are going to be all good to go. I think the one thing that did end up pretty nicely for New Mexico was that they came out of this game with no more defensive line injuries that we know of. Kyler Drake, Devin Brand Epps, they came back from injury and they were good to go completely. Bryce Santana was fine. Tyler Keeney, he did not play against Air Force. We'll see what his status is as well. But yeah, there is just a banged up defense right now. And, I kind of thought going into the bye that it would get better. And in some regards it did. But this linebacker spot, I mean, it could be a legitimate problem going forward because linebacker is a position where you can wear down throughout the course of the season. And we kind of saw it last year with really it was, Alec Marenko was really banged up. Dimitri played a ton. Mahalis ended up playing a lot because guys were just, just worn down at that point. So, yeah, secondary is still holding on for the most part. They do have options there. I don't know how much they're, in some spots, I think the jump between, 1 and 2 is a little bit different, a little bit larger in some spots, smaller in others. So we'll kind of see. But definitely the health of the defense remains a big question at this point. Scholarship issue, Rob, just get back. I'm not entirely sure at this point. And I'm still waiting on an answer on the one red shirt at this point, man. I'm still waiting who the one guy was. So,
all right, we're going to shift over to offense right now. As we do, I will say I'll pull up some of the scores real quick too, but I'm gonna some of these rankings rather that we just did for that showed Christian Ellis being one of the better safeties out west this year. But let's start with Juan Beza, another YouTube comment. How long till we see Soldier throw a touchdown? Imagine he throws it to Dampier.
Yeah, I think that is certainly in play, right?
I think there's a quarterback controversy. I don't know how you continue to start Devin Dampier right now when basically the efficiency of Soldier taking the snap is just unbelievable.
Yeah, and Soldier, Juan, I think you already know, but he played quarterback for a year at BYU. He only played in one game. So he does have that background to him, but I would not be surprised to see that happen. Juan, I think you were asking about the Soldier Wildcat last week as well too. So I'm glad I'm glad I wasn't completely wrong. I said oh yeah, I think it'll keep going, and they definitely made the most of it this week. So yeah.
To be clear, I do not think there's a quarterback controversy. Devin Dampier's doing okay.
He's serviceable. Yeah,
he's serviceable. Yeah. He is serviceable. So much so that I will point out that the sack stretch. Here I'll start with the offensive line. Let me give some love to an offensive line. We don't do that a whole lot, and this is one of those rankings that we talked about a little bit last week and really throughout the season. They hadn't given up a sack until the 42 mark of the second quarter of the sixth game of the season,
and it was not a
traditional sack.
It was not the protection fell apart on the left side of the offensive line. It was a Devin Dampier sack. It was 100% on him.
He was scrambling. He could have turned it upfield and avoided the sack, but he was looking to pass longer than I guess if he got a sack longer than he should have. But it wasn't a bad decision necessarily. He while being pursued ran out of bounds. It was a 1 yard loss. It was not a traditional sack by any stretch where you think of a defensive lineman actually bringing a quarterback down. That's not what it was. He was being pursued and ran out of bounds for a 1 yard loss, which is a sack. And the sack stretch, the last team in FBS football to surrender a sack was the UNM Lobos, which is impressive. And for it to have been a sack like that, impressive as well. This, again, is an offensive line that never played a snap together with each other. So to see Pro Football Focus rate out west the centers and number 3 on the list is a UNM center might surprise some people, but that's partly only because I think the expectations were so low for the offensive line.
A UNM center that had never played center in a game until this season. Mackenzie Agnello, Texas A&M Commerce transfer, had really just been a tackle his entire career. And all of a sudden, Juwan Singletary goes down before Montana State, I believe that week, with a season-ending injury. And instead of looking at Malik Lame, who's New Mexico Military Institute. Is
that a UNM and MSU NMMI?
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. He's a NIMI transfer. I should have said that. And he's the backup center instead of giving him the keys. Famika and I, the offensive line coach, knew that Agnello had some snapping in his background, and they decided to put him out there and gave it a rip. Went good in practice and kept working it, and he has been really good at center. I don't think he's had a bad snap this year off the top of my head. Been a good blocker. He's given them flexibility. The offensive line is probably about an injury or two away from being in some tough spots, particularly at tackle. I think if they get another injury to left tackle in particular, that's going to be a bit of a struggle down the stretch. But right now, they're chugging along and they're playing well. Agnello has been a huge part of that. Lawan Owens coming in as well as a redshirt freshman and taking over for Tevin Shaw, who suffered a season-ending injury. I think that's been really impressive too. And then the guards, Baraka and Richard Pierce, done a really nice job on the inside as well too. So I've waxed poetic about the offensive line on this live before, but it's kind of hard not to given the situation they're put into. Juan, you had the other question. Sean, when you posted snap counts via PFF, I noticed guys like Bailey and Toilolo had snaps. Is that them actually coming in on offense, or are they coming in for field goal protection and such? They are coming in on offense. These, I believe Bailey and Toilolo were only 1 or 2 snaps, and they came in at the very end of the first drive. I think on it was one of the quarterback design runs. It might have been the Devin TD where he kind of like spun in from 7 yards out. They were both in there on that. So those were actual like a field goal unit is a game snap and all that, but those were actual like during a drive snaps as opposed to like a PAT or anything like that. So yeah, that's a good question though.
All right, the star of the show though has been Devin Dampier, right? And, before we get to that, I will say I looked at the wide receiver rankings and was a little surprised that Luke Weissong wasn't up there. I know his he had the punt return, which wouldn't count towards wide receiver grades. I guess I suppose you can only say he's quieted down the last couple games while attention has been paid on him. It certainly isn't that he has dropped off. His stats have lowered a little bit, and some other players have stepped up as a result. But I think it has a lot to do, and I'll ask you, Sean, you know better than I, with the attention being paid to Luke Weissong as opposed to them just not going to him as much.
Yeah, I think in terms of like the actual production and all that, I think it was 6 catches for 50-something yards this last week, and it was quieter against was it that much quieter against New Mexico State? Definitely, I think that is 100% a defensive thing where they are paying him more attention, and that is just what happens when you do have the kind of start to the season that he had. In terms of like the grades you kind of mentioned, like the PFF ones and all that, where he's kind of lower in those advanced metrics, I think that's an efficiency thing and a volume thing. He's been targeted so much and has seen such a high volume that I think that is bringing down his grades a little bit more than a couple other guys who have some good production, but maybe not as much of an insane level of volume or anything like that. Like I don't think Nick Nash is super highly rated by PFF at this point, but Nick Nash has seen a really high level. He's seen a pretty high volume, similar to Weissong, but I think he still leads. I think Nash still leads the country in wide receiver targets. This is, of course, San Jose receiver Nick Nash.
Luke Weissong, New Mexico State, 1 rush, 15 yards, 5 receptions, 47 yards.
Yeah, there we go.
So back-to-back kind of lower volume, lower total yards anyway, games. But Luke Weissong is not only still playing pretty well, he is the guy that crushed the Rock after the game Saturday. Their post-game Rock Breaker award, or I don't know if it's an award or what it is, but it's not exactly a game ball.
Basically, yeah.
They make a mess in the locker room after every win. So you get a sledgehammer and break a big piece of rock. All right, here comes the
wait. Can we do one more? Ben Weissong has a good question that I want to address, or not like a question. Ben
Weissong. I want nothing more in this world than to see them get Isaiah Silliman a touchdown. What is it going to happen?
I want to write about him this week. It'll be this week or the week after. Isaiah Silliman has been, outside of quarterback play and Luke and the run game and all that, Isaiah Silliman has been the best, and the offensive line. Like there's a lot of good stuff going on the offense. Isaiah Silliman to me is the best story on this offense, far and away. Maybe the most undersung guy to this point. Isaiah Silliman played I think around like 200 snaps in the offensive line last year, kind of a reserve. Was injured during spring practice, excuse me. I don't do camps in spring. Fall camp, he's finally healthy, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with him. And they knew they needed depth at center, so they tried to see if he could snap. You can't play center if you can't snap, and it just never caught fire there with him learning how to snap. So they said, well, maybe we'll put him into the mix at guard. But throughout spring, they had Vincent Santos, another offensive lineman. They kind of put him in this tight end offensive lineman hybrid position. It's not like a true like jumbo set where you have like a 6 offensive lineman or anything like that.
I was going to say, you've seen NFL teams start to do it a little bit more too, where they're using offensive linemen not just as that extra offensive lineman, but actually using them a little bit in a backfield situation or actually running routes. Last night, your Detroit Lions yesterday against the Cowboys, man, they were trying hard to get an offensive lineman to score, and it did not work. But they had multiple. I suppose you call them trick plays, but like they're not really anymore. I think a lot more teams are finding one guy on their roster like this that they can use as a weapon.
I wouldn't even call it plays in the sense of like, who was it? Like Fridge Perry in the '85 Super Bowl, like scoring that TD or whatever when it should have been Walter Payton, but whatever. And Silliman, they had during the spring and all that, Vincent Santos, another offensive lineman, was kind of being used. And if you were at the spring game, you probably noticed this. Was kind of being used in the same role where he's kind of that hybrid and all that. And Santos ended up suffering an injury, I believe, against Montana State. And Silliman was put into this role as just kind of, the way offensive coordinator Jason Beck kind of told me about it. It's just like, well, if we're going to have one, we might as well need two, because we're not going to build all these plays, all this stuff around having, just this one guy in this one role. And they call it the Rhino position. And that's their name for this kind of hybrid thing. And Silliman has played a ton of snaps. Like, he's been used. It's like he's been used a lot. I don't know. He's played a huge role blocking. I'm very interested to see if they do figure out a way to get him either a receiving TD or a goal line carry, as Juan's kind of noting as well, too. Because one of the things that drew them in terms of converting him that position was that, he had the size and he had the strength, but he could also run. And I don't know. I want to do a story about him. It'll be this week or the week after, but I think he's been a super kind of unsung piece of this offense, and certainly deserves his due to this point.
There's Juan's comment about the got to give him a goal line carry.
I like.
I'll throw a real fake Elton Musk's comment in here. Lobo receiving core has been stellar this year. I agree. I agree. I've been really impressed with the receiving core. I'm going to go back here and point this out. Ben Wysong saying, "I want nothing more in this world than to see them get Isaiah Silliman a touchdown." I think I'm not going to put words in Ben's mouth here. I'm not going to speak for the Wysong family, but something tells me that because this happened on Saturday, that now they can move up their priority list, seeing an Isaiah Silliman touchdown, because this is what they got on Saturday out of Luke Wysong.
Last week had a career best 4 punts of at least 50 yards. Here comes Wysong. Good blocks initially. No flags down. There he goes. Luke Wysong back to the outside with the convoy. Touchdown, New Mexico.
So I'm going to take a guess and say that now that's what Ben Wysong wants to see more than anything, because he already saw Luke Wysong take one to the house on Saturday. And now that that's been accomplished, he can start rooting for the big dogs to get some plays drawn up for them as well. Without further ado, we're an hour in, and I haven't gotten to the Devin Dampier love of the week. I am going to throw in the rankings here. This is again from Pro Football Focus, and you can see right there, number 2 quarterback in the West with a pretty not just number 2, but like a really high ranking. When you're hovering around that 90 spot in any of these position grades, you're doing really, really good. Devin Dampier behind only Shedeur Sanders at Colorado, who, by the way, again, have your opinions of Prime and what he's doing, of what Deion Sanders is doing with Colorado and all that stuff. Have your opinions about Sanders and all that. He right now might be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft this coming year. He's certainly in the conversation. I heard Colin Cowherd on the radio say this past week, even in a loss, he almost with Sanders having almost 400 yards passing and 10 yards per attempt, while getting just kind of beat up throughout the game with high pressure against a solid, not national championship level, but a really solid Kansas State team. Impressed him enough to think that Shedeur Sanders right now is the leader in the clubhouse with who's going to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. I don't know if I'd go that far, but my point being here, when you're just talking about one metric to grade quarterbacks, you got Devin Dampier at the UNM Lobos and Shedeur Sanders, who are pretty close in a score that measures quarterbacks. One of them being talked about as a potential first pick in the NFL draft. The other one, and I tweeted this earlier today without putting much thought into it, I will admit, but like I don't think it's wrong. Like I don't think it's wrong to say that right now Devin Dampier is the best quarterback in the Mountain West. At a minimum, it's a conversation worth having right now, because he is doing it. He's doing everything, even in their losses. He has been performing well. So what do you think about Devin's grade right here among all these quarterbacks out West? He is just a sophomore, as Juan is pointing out here. But yeah, what do you think, Sean? Devin Dampier's performance at this point isn't just week to week. He's playing good. He's having a pretty special season overall. Like, we're going to have to start putting in some sort of bigger context, I suppose, where it ranks nationally and historically within the program.
So I will put it in a national context right now with the with PFF pulled up on my computer. The number one ranked PFF overall offensive quarterback is Blake Horvath, 93.2 overall grade. Thought it was really interesting after the game, kind of seeing what Air Force players and all that said. Cornerback Jamari Bellamy said, like, hey, props to the quarterback, because we haven't seen a guy like him in a long time. When they just saw Blake Horvath, the number one PFF quarterback in the country, he's doing a hell of a job at Navy this year, literally the week before playing New Mexico. So he's second overall out west. Shedeur is one. Shedeur is number 4 nationally, behind Cam Ward, Bryson Daly at Army. And then nationally, Devin on the PFF rankings only is tied with Louisiana Lafayette's ULL's Ben Wooldridge with a grade of 89.8, 16th overall. That's behind Syracuse's Kyle McCord, Indiana's Curtis Rourke, Vanderbilt's Diego Pavia, Texas Arch Manning, Jackson Dart, Ole Miss, Chandler Morris, North Texas. A lot of good names, a lot of production there. So definitely, he is there. In terms of the Mountain West conversation, the closest, the second-ranked quarterback in the country in the Mountain West via these kind of national rankings is Brendan Lewis in Nevada, 23 overall, 88.2. It is. I think my one thing with is he the best quarterback in the Mountain West? I was always a little bit hesitant to talk about him in that sense, out of like a level of respect for Mikey Keene and what we've seen Mikey Keene do. It has not been a great stretch for Mikey Keene. In particular, I've even seen some fans call for him to get benched and all that. I think that's overkill, honestly. But he has turned the ball over. It has not been a very smooth operation, whether that's due to not having Jeff Tedford around or whatever. Yeah. So I think right now, honestly, I've been very hesitant to say it. I think he is right now. Devin is right now, probably the best quarterback in the Mountain West, but I still think you got to give Emmett Brown a little bit of a due. And I'm very curious to see how the rest of the season shakes out. But the production has been magnificent. And you've heard a lot of opposing coaches talk about it. Nate Dryling mentioned it today too. Troy Calhoun mentioned it after the Air Force game. What Devin does in the run game and what he brings to that run game, as Dryling mentions right here on the screen and all that, is really, really, really tough for opposing defenses and opposing teams to figure out and find a way to deal with. And the fact that, he does have a really strong arm and he's got a lot of zip-on throws. And he is, the progression of him just in terms of how he manages an arm and all that from when he first came in has been really impressive. And it's showing up this year too. And again, I'll hammer it too. Back-to-back games with no turnovers from Devin. I think that's big as well because, that was a bit of an issue earlier in the year. So if it kind of keeps the course, we're definitely going to be talking about this more on lives. And I was thinking about it earlier today. What are the ideal contexts to start writing about this? But yes, Devin has been really, really impressive. And it's definitely something.
Nate Dryling, of course, of a year ago, New Mexico State fame, defense coordinator fame. And his quote, just for anybody who doesn't see on the screen, if you happen to just be listening in the background or something, what he said today about Devin Dampier is number one. He was asked about the New Mexico Lobo offense, and his quote, according to our friends at the Ag Ship Utah State account, quote, number one is quarterback play. Dampier is unbelievable. He's running the ball better than maybe anybody else we've seen to this point, and he has a laser arm. Dryling was also asked about Bronco Mendenhall, to which he said, quote, he's been arguably one of the top coaches in the country at a couple of stops. I think it was a home run hire for New Mexico. And he's certainly not the only one to say such things about the hire of Bronco Mendenhall at UNM and all that good stuff. So wanted to share a couple of those there. I will also point out, and this is the high level analysis that I provide, and I think people should hit that follow button on social media, because I provide this year round, really. Devin Dampier's initials are DD, and the best basketball player for the Lobos is Donovan Dent. Don't get those names mixed up. Lesser qualified people might do that.
Do that, like, ever.
Yeah, I don't know who would do that, but
like,
pros don't do it. And I'll tell you what, just be careful. You might mix that up sometime and accidentally say Donovan Dent or Donovan Dampier is having a great year at quarterback for the Lobos. So
we need to, UNM needs to find a way to get the two of them together in some kind of photo shoot or
sure.
Yeah, like old school, like kind of like promotional poster or something like that. Like, figure that out. Like, that's way overdue.
I was about to. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, where are you going with that?
I was about to say before I thought it through. I was about to say they could do something with the double D's, but that's probably
no.
Yeah, that's not what I was. That's we'll move on before I get in trouble here.
Minimal innuendos.
All right, man. What do you say? Lobos favored. Let's say gets up to as much as a field goal. Lobos favored by a field goal. Or anywhere from 1.5 to a field goal by game time on Saturday is probably what this is going to look like in my mind. I don't think it'll swing back the other way because, barring injury or something weird that we don't know about at this point, I would actually say as more people look into the numbers and more people look into it, it might start going. The line might start growing bigger because UNM has been playing so well offensively that I think more people are going to take that money or take that line right now at 1.5 or 2 for the Lobos. So they're going to have to make it bigger. Vegas will have to move that line up so they can get more action on Utah State. I never would have guessed coming into the season that UNM would have been favored in this game both ways. I thought Utah State would have. We didn't foresee what was going to happen to them.
No, yeah. And for those that don't remember, obviously Blake Anderson was the head coach coming into this season, supposed to be, before his dismissal over the summer. So that is throwing things off kilter to a certain degree. Yeah.
I'm going to real quickly, because I teased it, I am putting out later this afternoon. It'll be online at abqjournal.com, where you can catch all our coverage of Lobo football, Lobo basketball, high school sports, everything. So take a look, abqjournal.com/sports if you want to get there one step quicker. I will be posting my preseason Mountain West hoops ballot. Yesterday was a big day for hoops nerds like me. I am into analytics. I am into this cheesy stuff that not everybody is into, but happy Ken Pom Day to those who celebrate. And Ken Pomeroy, and his website is college basketball nerd, and certainly a college basketball media nerd. Best friend. I am trying to pull it up here. He posted his preseason rankings. The Mountain West Conference, for those who are interested in such things, is ranked the number 6 conference in all of college basketball by KenPom.com. Again, this is not a person putting together his personal opinion on rankings. He's putting in a whole lot of data into these rankings, and this is what it kind of churns out. I will share this here. Look, it's only $20, or I don't know if he upped it to 25 by now. He should. He could up it.
Like, I don't cover college basketball as much as you, but I watch a lot of college basketball. It's worth having a Ken Pom subscription. Like, in my opinion, it really is.
It is beyond my understanding and comprehension as to how anybody who does cover college basketball, as I do, would not have this. And if you don't, it is still probably worth having. It is the price of, one night out at the movie, I suppose, or
like
whatever you want to compare it to.
If you care about basketball, like, have Ken Pom for sure.
Right. So let's we'll scroll to the bottom here first. I am flying out to Las Vegas on Wednesday for Thursday's men's basketball Mountain West Media Days. Thursday, with all the coaches available, 2 players from every team are available. For the Lobos, they are bringing Donovan Dent and Nelly Jr. Joseph, which is interesting. I love those 2 guys, and those are the 2 best players in my estimation on this team. What is interesting about it is Donovan Dent does not like doing media. He is a player of the year, so you got to bring him, but he does not like it. And Nelly Jr. Joseph has a very thick accent and is very hard to get sound bites from. But I'll tell you what, I think he might be the best center in the league. So those are the two right players to bring, but I don't know you're going to get a whole heck of a lot of sound bites around the league out of those two. But those are the two right players to bring if you're UNM anyway. Ken Palm ranking yesterday. The preseason media poll will come out Thursday morning. I suspect it will look different than what Ken Palm has here. I'm going to start, though, with the conference rankings. If you look down here, SEC, he ranks number 1. And then obviously the Power 4 in basketball is a Power 5 because the Big East does not have football. So outside of the Power 5 conferences in basketball, the Mountain West is the best conference in the group of 5. Now, it is splitting in 2 years. The Pac-12 will become the new best conference. But the Mountain West, I don't think falls off with even what they're losing. I don't think the Mountain West is going to fall off very much off of this ranking. Anyway, as it stands for now, Mountain West is 6th. And you got A10, the American and the West Coast Conference with Gonzaga at number 9, and the WAC is a positive top 10. This does go down to 31 teams, though, and for the Mountain West still to be number 6, I think is pretty impressive for a league that got 6 teams into the tournament last year, but is certainly going to have a drop back. I think it's the Mountain West Conference lost an awful lot of production. Just on New Mexico, for instance, while I think UNM can be better, as crazy as it sounds, without Jalen House and Jamal Mashburn Jr., the reality is the production that they lost from Jalen House and Jamal Mashburn Jr. moving on is huge. San Diego State went to the Sweet 16. They pretty much lose their entire starting lineup. Their bench had one of the San Diego State fan. It must be basketball season because Tom, the San Diego State fan, tweeted me today that they are the deepest in program history. I mean, they get their leading returning scorer, I think, averaged 5 points a game last year. Maybe they're deep, but who would know? I mean, these aren't like stars that came in from other programs. I do think San Diego State's going to be just fine, but come on, man. Like, it's mid-October, and I'm being told by Aztec fans now that they deserve more love because they're the deepest in program history. I don't know, man. What Ken Palm's rankings here show for the Mountain West is Boise State number 1. I think it's safe to say Boise State will be the number 1 in the media poll come Thursday. They have Ken Palm's computer turned out San Diego State as number 2. New Mexico, number 3. I'm just going to run down the list, even though you can probably see it on the screen if you're looking. Boise State 1, San Diego State 2, New Mexico 3, Utah State 4, Nevada 5, Colorado State 6, UNLV 7. That's the cutoff from the top of the league, all being ranked in the top 100 out of 363 teams. And then the bottom 4 teams in the league are all ranked 200 or worse, and that's San Jose State, Air Force, Wyoming, and Fresno State. Real quick, I'll give you the sneak peek at my Mountain West poll that will be coming out later, and I'll have some comments on it. I do have Boise State number 1 and New Mexico number 2. I have Nevada 3 and San Diego State 4. I think San Diego State at 4 might be one of the higher picks in the media poll. They don't return anybody, and I think a lot of people are going to have them in the 5, 6, 7 range. Which is crazy to think of because they're the best program in Mountain West basketball history. But my preseason poll is going to go Boise State 1, New Mexico 2, Nevada 3, San Diego State 4, Utah State 5, UNLV 6, Colorado State 7. And then the bottom 4 there, I actually have in the same order, San Jose State, Air Force, Wyoming, and Fresno State. It is what it is. I turned in this ballot last week. I just think New Mexico and Boise State are probably in a tier by themselves, the 1-2 tier. Either one of them can win this league. I do think there's a little bit of a drop to number 3 at Nevada, and then a little bit of a drop to what I think is a 4-team cluster in the middle of 4, 5, 6, and 7 with San Diego State, Utah State, Colorado State, and UNLV. I think all 4 of those teams can be pretty good, and I think this will be a 2, maybe 3-team league. It won't be 6 like last year, but there you go. There's my quick ramble, not so quick ramble, on Mountain West hoops. Sean, anything on hoops? Are you in any way up to snuff on all your Mountain West preseason picks and all the rosters? I'm sure you know what Air Force has coming off the bench and who the new wing at Utah State is and all that good stuff, right?
Apparently I need to do a little bit more reading on UNLV. I thought they would be maybe a tick higher. You had them over Colorado State in your poll, but yeah, very curious to see how this league plays out. And I know I love college basketball, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. But for right now, my focus is wholeheartedly on college football.
As well, it should be. That's what you're getting paid the big bucks for at the Journal. The AP Top 25 preseason poll, which again was also due last week. I am a voter in that, as Sean is in the football poll. The preseason AP Hoops poll came out today. The Lobos have either 7 or 8 games this year against ranked teams or teams receiving votes. In league, that is two votes, 2 games against Boise State and 2 games against San Diego State. In the non-conference, you're looking at a game against number 22 UCLA. That's their second game of the season, November 8th. So less than a month from now, they're playing number 22 UCLA. And Mick Cronin, another Pitino guy and a close friend of Richard Pitino, but coached for Rick Pitino, who wears a suit. He still wears a suit on the sideline.
Sometimes an all-white suit.
Team quarter zip versus team suit will be in full effect in Henderson, Nevada, where the Lobos played 4 games last year. November 8th, that's a Friday night game. The other ranked opponents that the Lobos, or receiving votes opponents that the Lobos play, they play Arizona State in their Thanksgiving tournament in Palm Springs. And then the next day, they will either play USC, who did not receive votes, or St. Mary's, who did receive votes. So I think I'm forgetting one other team. But anyway, the Lobos are facing a minimum of 7 preseason receiving votes teams, or potentially 8 preseason receiving votes teams. It's a pretty good schedule compared to what they've had traditionally, certainly in recent years, but really forever. New Mexico Lobos have never scheduled very strong in the non-conference. That's not a new phenomenon. That is sort of what they've done forever. So there we are. Looks like the 2 fastest teams, according to KenPom this year, on the court are going to be in the Mountain West are going to be a Fresno State team that's going to run and gun, and hopefully for them make a few shots, because they got a entirely new roster. They're rebuilding, and New Mexico looks like about 11th in the country. I think they'll slow down just a little bit, and I do think their defense will be better than 55. I think they can really play some defense this year, so we shall see. Sean, that's what I got for this week. Anything else you want to add for Lobo football or anything going on this week?
In terms of Lobo football, not really. We will have a story later today, kind of encapsulating everything Bronco said in the press conference, and we'll have a normal coverage schedule this week in terms of UNM football. I covered golf, the MB3 match play event at Twin Warriors Golf Club. I did that for 2 days last week, so I didn't have nearly as much UNM football content as usual, but yeah, looking to get some more stories out this week. Thoughts just across the board in general. Utah quarterback Cam Rising. Yeah, so he is out indefinitely again for like the 3rd time, 4th time, whatever. And apparently he has an 8th year of eligibility left. And I'm really do what you want to do and like make money, and like, if they'll have you, they'll have you. But like, I don't want to be Mr. Get a Job, but maybe get a job, like for real.
I want you to think about what 8 years of eligibility means. He's not only going to be a quarterback, if he does take this 8th year, if he gets it, he will not only be a quarterback who will have teammates who were just freshmen in high school when he started. Like, he's going to have teammates who were, freshman years, 9th grade, 4 years less than that. He's going to have teammates who were in elementary school when he started college football. It's ridiculous. But hey, it is what it is.
I will be in the same state as him this weekend. Do you have any Logan recommendations? Yeah.
They have no weird food in Logan. I can tell you that, according to the real fake Elton Musk. Look, for those we're not going to get into it too in depth, but for those that missed it, Sean, we now have a list of food Sean has not had. That
I was being earnest.
Grapes, blueberries, hot fries he's never had, cotton candy he's never had, and Greek yogurt he has had. Overdid it, but now he's dipping his toe back into the Greek yogurt world, which is weird. Are you having Greek yogurt again?
Yeah, I gotta make a store run probably tomorrow morning and get groceries for the week. But yeah, so we'll see. Maybe I will try things in Logan. Get something different going there.
There was a basketball comment that I'll let get in before I should have brought in earlier. I apologize, Juan, on YouTube. What are your thoughts on freshman Jovan Milicevic on the Lobo basketball team? Crazy to think that guy is 18. He's a big boy, man. He's got tree trunk legs. He can stretch the floor. 6'10". I do think he will come off the bench, but I think he will be a big minutes freshman at the 4 spot who can stretch it out a little bit, and he can hit the outside shot. I do think, and this might just be because he's a freshman and you want to get ahead of it before it becomes an issue. I think the coaching staff is trying to hammer in to him. You're the biggest guy on the court. Get inside. Go play the 5. Go play some center. Go play center, because he might in practice tend to stretch it out and float outside of the 3-point line a little too much for a big guy who is 6'10" and 240 or something like that, 250. And I think they've been hammering into him a lot at practice, like, you got to play the 5, go play the 5. And if he's a 4 or 5, though, he can stretch it out and will stretch it out. But I think right now maybe he's doing it a little too much in practice, and they want to see him make sure he understands that if you have that size advantage, you don't just ignore it. So I think fans are going to love watching him play, though. He's a big guy that can stretch the floor, and if he's willing to play inside, then they won't get frustrated with him. Sometimes if you have a center who won't play inside, fans get really frustrated. I don't think that's the case here. And I don't think it's what the coaches are wanting to see happen. So they've been kind of getting after him in practice a little bit to go play the 5. So we shall see how that turns out. October 28th, I believe, they play UTEP. That's when basketball gets going. So for now, Saturday, Lobo football gets the chance to extend its win streak to 3. Kind of keep those maybe thoughts alive about bowl eligibility. Maybe they get to 6 games.
They have to. This is kind of I don't. Is there any such thing as like a must win or whatever?
Well, if you're talking bowl, yeah.
If you're talking bowl, this definitely seems like you gotta have this one kind of game.
Yeah.
In that regard. But we'll see. It represents a different challenge than what New Mexico has seen the past couple weeks. And I don't have any strong leans at the moment. I think New Mexico should be favored to a certain degree, not by like a touchdown or anything like that. But I still I haven't seen enough to feel good of saying that's going to play out one way or the other.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's the right line. Lobo's favored, but I don't know that that's what I would predict as the outcome just yet. But man, they've been playing well. So I don't know that they can keep it up forever is the thing. I think they've been playing pretty well. They got to have a stinker on offense eventually, right? Maybe Fresno State was that stinker. I don't know. And
at some point, if you can't close games defensively, you're going to get burned for it. It's just going to happen at some point. There are going
Montana State.
The onside, and that happened, but it felt like a different level. It feels like it could still possibly happen again.
Yeah. So they got to close games. Are they going to be able to win a game when their offense isn't firing on all cylinders? We'll see. Maybe this Saturday will be the game that they get tested with that. So thanks again for watching. Thanks again for sending in your comments, your reader questions, and all that good stuff. We'll be doing this post game after the game in Logan on Saturday. We'll also be having next Monday. Every Monday at 2, we're going to have one of these. Every post game football, we're going to have one of these, and we will settle in pretty soon on what regular access to these kind of shows we're going to do for basketball pretty soon. But once again, thanks, guys. Sean, thanks for being on, man.
Geoff, thank you for having me. That post-game show will actually be like a nice little 5:30, 6 p.m. kind of deal.
Weird, huh?
The late ones we've been doing. So at some point, we're going to get one of these under an hour. But it was not that day. Thank you to everybody that watched. We always appreciate it. And thank you for interacting too.
All right, everybody, go enjoy some grapes or some cotton candy or something normal people do. Until next time, thanks for watching.